What would happen if you tried to live like a saint in the middle of modern American life? Traffic jams, deadlines, smartphones and all. Would it be enlightening or just incredibly awkward? What if your daily routine had to make room for silence, sacrifice and radical humility? I didn't expect this experiment to change me. Honestly, I started it as a challenge, something between a personal dare and a social experiment. Could I go 1 week trying to live with the mindset and habits of a saint? No shortcuts, no pretending, just attempting to act, think, and live like the holiest people I've ever read about. And spoiler alert, it wasn't just hard. It was disruptive, inconvenient, beautiful, and kind of addictive. I chose 3 saints to loosely model my week after. Saint Francis of Assisi for simplicity and humility, Saint Therese of Lisieux for intentional kindness in little things, and Saint Ignatius of Loyola for prayerful awareness. The first day I woke up earlier than usual. No music, no scrolling, just sat in quiet and tried to pray. Not a fancy poetic prayer, just being with God. My thoughts wandered every 30 seconds, but I stayed. That was new for me. Then came the real challenge, humility in traffic. I had somewhere to be, someone cut me off, and I felt the old anger rise up. But instead of reacting, I said a Hail Mary for them. I didn't feel holy, I felt fake. But later, the stillness stayed with me. That evening, I gave up my usual TV time to call a friend who'd been lonely, not for content, not for clout, just because I imagined that's what a saint would do. By midweek, the experiment got harder. At work, I tried to put everyone else's needs before my own. I slowed down, listened better, spoke less, and bit my tongue when gossip floated my way. I can't lie, it was exhausting. But it also gave me a strange sense of clarity. My brain felt less noisy. My motives felt cleaner. I noticed beauty in the small things, the warmth of my coffee, the tired smile from a coworker, a line from scripture that wouldn't leave me alone. Saints live in the real world. Some of them walked through plagues, wars, and rejection. They weren't Instagram perfect. They were bruised, tired, often misunderstood. But they lived with purpose and deep love. Trying to imitate even a fraction of that made me realize how distracted I usually am, how reactive, how rarely I offer my day to God. I also had to face something uncomfortable, how attached I am to comfort. Saints didn't chase ease, they chased meaning. I skipped a few meals to understand fasting, gave away something I loved to someone who needed it more, and forgave someone who didn't ask for it. Every act made me feel more human, less of a consumer and more of a soul. And weirdly, I felt freer. Prayer was the backbone of the whole experiment. Short ones throughout the day. God, guide me, help me love better, keep me patient. I didn't hear a divine voice, but I felt nudged, corrected, loved. And when I slipped, when I complained, acted selfishly, or forgot the point, I didn't spiral. I just started again. One night, I journaled. Is this what holiness feels like? Not perfection, but being awake. I think saints live differently, not because they're flawless, but because they're alert, aware of God in every moment, however ordinary. That awareness shaped everything. How I treated the barista, how I handled stress, how I responded to someone else's pain. And here's something that surprised me. People noticed. A coworker asked if I was okay because I seemed weirdly peaceful. My sibling texted, "Whatever you're doing this week, it's working." I hadn't told anyone what I was doing, but the fruit of it showed up. Not loudly, just enough. There were still moments of failure. I got snappy on day 5, skipped my prayer time on day 6, and almost gave up by the end. But something inside me had shifted. I didn't want to go back to my normal pace. I didn't want to keep living distracted, reactive, and numb. Trying to live like a saint didn't make me better than anyone. It just reminded me who I want to become. And here's the crazy part, we can all try it. You don't need a robe or a halo, you need a heart that's willing. One step, one choice at a time, not to earn anything, but to be transformed. Holiness is not a finish line, it's a direction. If you're curious what would happen if you lived like a saint for a day, or even an hour, start small. Choose silence, choose humility, forgive quickly, love boldly, pray even when you feel nothing, give something away, fast from something unnecessary. And do it not for approval, but because it frees your soul. The world needs more light. And saints, even in disguise, carry light into the darkest places. Your ordinary life can become sacred. It starts with a decision. What surprised me the most wasn't how difficult it was to live like a saint. but how quickly the world pushed back. On day 2, I showed up at work with the intention to be totally present, to listen with patience and to respond with grace. Before lunch, I was already frustrated, ignored, and behind schedule. Normally, I would have snapped, or at least shut down emotionally. But I remembered something I had read from Saint Therese: do small things with great love. So I made a silent choice to keep going gently. At the coffee machine, a coworker was venting about something I had no stake in. Instead of offering quick solutions or escaping, I stood there and listened, fully. I didn't fix it, I just heard her. She said, "Thanks, no one really listens anymore." That moment was tiny, but it stuck with me. Maybe this is what sainthood looks like in 2025, unhurried attention in a distracted world. Later that afternoon, I got a call from someone I'd been avoiding, an old friend who had hurt me years ago. Everything in me wanted to ignore it, to stay in the comfort of being righteously distant. But I picked up. We talked. It was awkward, but it was honest. Forgiveness didn't flood in like some holy movie scene, but the wall between us cracked a little. That crack felt sacred. Every saint I've read about struggled with human emotions, doubt, fatigue, even despair. They weren't immune to frustration or anxiety, but what set them apart was how they responded. Not by running, but by turning. Back to God, back to peace, back to love. I tried to imitate that by pausing every time I felt overwhelmed. One deep breath, a whispered prayer, "God, be here now." That's it. Sometimes I felt something, most times I didn't. But I noticed that even the pause changed me. Midweek, I started noticing patterns. How often I reached for my phone when things got uncomfortable. How quickly I judged people in my head. How easily I got bored with silence. Trying to live like a saint exposed all of that. Not in a shaming way, but in a refining way. Like God was gently pointing and saying, "You don't need this. Let it go." I also discovered a strange kind of joy. Not the happy dancing joy we're sold on social media, but a grounded kind. The kind that shows up when you do something hard and quiet and no one sees it but God. Like washing the dishes without complaining, like choosing to forgive again, like praying the rosary in the dark even when your mind drifts. Those moments felt invisible, but they were real and healing. Day 4, I tried something new, starting my day with no agenda except to love well. I whispered it when I got up, "Lord, help me love well today." That prayer followed me. When someone cut in front of me in traffic, when the grocery line dragged, when a stranger looked upset. My instinct to react was still there, but so was the prayer. And that made all the difference. Living like a saint doesn't mean being pious 24/7. It means choosing love when love is inconvenient, choosing humility when you want credit, choosing silence when you want to win the argument, choosing to carry someone else's burden for a while. That week, I realized sainthood isn't about grand gestures. It's in the daily yes, the secret yes, the kind that only heaven sees. And that's where the real transformation happens, not overnight, but over time, through ordinary moments infused with extraordinary grace. I remember journaling one night, "Holiness isn't a task list, it's a presence." That's when it clicked. I'd been trying to do holy things, but what changed me was learning to be with God, right in the middle of the mess. The dishwasher humming, the dog barking, the inbox overflowing. He was there, and the saints knew that. That's why they seemed so calm even in chaos. They had trained their souls to stay rooted. By Friday I was tired, but not the burnout kind of tired. More like the feeling after a long hike, worn out but satisfied. I looked back and saw that nothing major had happened. No visions, no miracles, but something had shifted deep in me. I didn't want to fill the silence anymore. I didn't need to prove anything, I just wanted to be more like Christ. I started ending each day with this prayer, "Lord, make me a little more loving tonight than I was this morning." It wasn't dramatic, but it was honest. And I think that's enough. Saints weren't superheroes, they were humans who chose surrender, again and again. And here's the truth, you don't have to be perfect to start. You don't have to feel qualified or holy, you just have to be willing. One moment at a time, one decision at a time. The grace comes after the yes. I kept reminding myself that even the greatest saints started somewhere, usually afraid, unsure, unqualified, but they began, and so can we. Holiness is not for the elite, it's for anyone hungry for something deeper than comfort or applause. It's for those who dare to believe that love, radical, humble, consistent love, is still the most powerful force on earth. By the weekend, I started seeing life through a different lens, not as a checklist of achievements, but as a series of sacred invitations. Every person I encountered, every inconvenience, every emotion became an opportunity to respond like Christ. And the challenge wasn't in doing big, brave things. It was in the quiet resistance to selfishness. That, I learned, is where sainthood begins. I remember waking up Saturday to a cold, rainy morning. Normally I'd groan, stay in bed longer, maybe scroll on my phone. But I felt something different this time, a nudge to begin the day intentionally. I sat up, lit a candle, and prayed. Not with fancy words, just with longing. Lord, help me live with love today. That one sentence set the tone. I wasn't chasing perfection anymore. I was just trying to love well. That day, my roommate asked for help moving some furniture. I had other plans, but something inside whispered, this is the moment. So I stayed. We worked together for over an hour, not saying much. Later, she said, thanks, I really needed that today. Her words hit deeper than she probably knew. Sometimes the saintly thing isn't to preach, it's to show up. Later, I passed a man outside the store holding a cardboard sign. I didn't have cash and I felt awkward like I usually do, but instead of looking away, I asked if he wanted a sandwich. He nodded. I bought 2 and sat down beside him on the bench. We ate in silence for a bit. Then he asked, why'd you sit down? I said, because you matter. He smiled and said, that's rare. That moment felt heavy and holy. I kept noticing these little shifts, not in the world but in me. When someone interrupted me, I didn't bristle. When plans changed last minute, I didn't spiral. I paused. I breathed. I remembered the saints I'd read about, how they walked through life slowly, attentively, always aware of God's presence, even when life was messy. The hardest moment came Saturday night. I was exhausted, emotionally drained, and honestly just wanted to binge watch something and disconnect. But instead I took a short walk and prayed a decade of the rosary. I didn't feel anything mystical, but I remembered the commitment I had made. I kept my yes, and that made me feel strong in a quiet way. The rosary itself had become a kind of rhythm. The repetition didn't dull my mind, it focused it. Each Hail Mary felt like a step on a path, and though I didn't always feel God's presence, I trusted He was near. That trust was new for me. Usually I equated prayer with feeling, but now I was learning faith is steadier than that. Sometimes you don't need to feel it, you just need to return to it. On Sunday morning, I journaled about the whole experience. What surprised me was how freeing it felt to live for something beyond myself, to give without demanding return, to love without needing applause. I had always thought saintliness was for other people, for those with halos in stained glass windows, but I was beginning to see it was for the ordinary too, for anyone willing to say yes to grace again and again. I went to Mass that day with new eyes. The prayers hit deeper. The silence before communion wasn't empty, it was full. Full of all the small yeses I had offered all week. No one around me knew, but God did. And I think that's the secret of sainthood. It's not about being noticed, it's about being faithful. Living like a saint for a week didn't make me holy, it made me aware. Aware of my weaknesses, yes, but also of how present God is, even in the smallest acts. I didn't come out glowing or transformed. I still struggled. I still got impatient. But I also saw glimpses of who I'm becoming, the kind of person who chooses love, even when no one's watching. I ended the week the way I began, with a prayer. But this time it was simpler. Thank you, Lord, for this week. Help me carry it into tomorrow. That was it. No big finale, just gratitude and hope. Hope that I could continue this journey, not perfectly, but honestly. If you're reading this and wondering if it's worth trying, if living like a saint in a modern world even makes sense, I get it. It sounds impossible, but maybe that's the point. Saints didn't do it alone. They leaned on grace, on community, on prayer, and so can we. Because in the end, living like a saint isn't about escaping the world. It's about entering it with eyes open and heart surrendered. It's about trusting that even your smallest yes matters, that even your quietest love is loud in heaven. You don't need to be extraordinary, you just need to be available. And when you are, when you show up with your messy, ordinary, faithful self, God does extraordinary things through you, one hidden act at a time. I thought Monday would be the hardest, but Tuesday surprised me. That was the day I faced the quiet test, the kind where no one would know if I gave up. There were no crowds, no affirmations, no dramatic moments, just ordinary hours, stretched long and slow. But I learned something vital. It's in the quiet that character is carved. That morning, I woke up late. I had planned to start the day with prayer, but I hit snooze 3 times. The guilt crept in fast. Old habits told me to give up. See, you're not cut out for this. But I fought that voice. I stood up, lit the candle again and prayed, not with polished words, but with presence. That was enough. Throughout the day, I tried to make small choices toward love, not to be noticed, just to live rightly. I greeted my co-workers with more attention than usual. I listened more, even when I wanted to talk. When I wanted to scroll, I paused and breathed instead. I remembered that saints aren't perfect. They're just consistent in the direction of God. At lunch, I sat alone intentionally, taking time to reflect. The cafeteria was loud, chaotic, but I remembered how saints often withdrew not to escape, but to center themselves. I read a passage from the Gospel of Matthew and thought about Jesus' words. When you pray, go into your room, close the door, and pray to your Father who is unseen. That verse echoed in my mind. This wasn't about performance, it was about communion. Then came the test. That afternoon, a co-worker criticized my project, harshly. My pride flared instantly. I wanted to defend myself, correct them, maybe even retaliate. But I remembered St. Francis, how he embraced humiliation as a gift, not because it felt good, but because it made room for grace. So I stayed silent. I nodded, I listened, and I let it pass. My ego bruised, but my soul expanded. That evening, I didn't want to pray the rosary. I was tired, my back hurt. The day had worn me down. But I remembered something I once heard. The rosary is a rope that pulls you through the storm. I picked it up. Bead by bead, I moved through the mysteries. No fireworks, no angelic visions, but I felt steadied, like someone had placed their hand on my shoulder and said, "You're not alone." Midweek, I started noticing changes, not big ones, but subtle. I became more patient in traffic. I answered texts with kindness. I smiled more, not because I was trying harder, but because something was softening in me. When you live like a saint, even briefly, it changes your posture toward the world. You move slower, you notice more, you react less, you love deeper. Thursday evening, I visited a church during adoration. The space was nearly empty, just a few candles, the monstrance, and the quiet hum of reverence. I sat in the back pew. At first, my thoughts were noisy, plans, anxieties, distractions. But slowly, the silence did its work. I looked at the Eucharist and whispered, "Jesus, I don't know how to be holy, but I want to be near you." And that felt like enough. On the way home, I stopped by the grocery store. A woman in front of me didn't have enough for her groceries. She looked embarrassed. Without thinking, I stepped up and covered the rest. She turned to me, eyes wide, and said, "Why would you do that?" I just smiled and said, "Because I've been blessed today." That moment reminded me, saintly living isn't grand, it's generous. By Friday, I no longer felt like I was doing an experiment. It had become something deeper, a quiet rhythm of surrender. I didn't think about impressing God anymore. I just wanted to be available to Him. That day, I wrote a letter to a friend I hadn't spoken to in years. We'd had a falling out, and I had held on to bitterness. But I knew it was time to let go. I wrote honestly, humbly, and mailed it. I didn't expect a reply. The act itself was freeing. That night I lit the candle again and sat in silence. I didn't say much, I just breathed. I imagined the saints, Teresa, Francis, Augustine, all sitting in silence before God just like this, not because they had answers, but because they had hunger. That hunger for God was growing in me, slowly, quietly, but surely. Living like a saint hadn't made me more impressive, it made me more real. I laughed more. I forgave faster. I listened harder. I asked for help. I cried when I needed to. I didn't hide behind spiritual language. I just lived with open hands. And in doing so, I started to see others differently too. I saw God in the barista rushing through orders, in the janitor humming a hymn, in the mom calming her screaming child. I saw that the sacred wasn't far away. It was right here, under the noise, waiting to be noticed. By the end of the day, I didn't want the week to end. Not because I had succeeded, but because I had changed. Something in me had cracked open. The hunger wasn't just for holiness, it was for presence, for meaning, for God. And that's what living like a saint does. It wakes you up, it clears the fog, It reorders your heart, not perfectly, but faithfully. Saturday came with a strange sense of clarity. I woke up early without an alarm, and the first thought that crossed my mind wasn't a to-do list or my phone screen. It was simply this: God, thank you for another chance to try again. That might not sound like much, but for me, it was huge. Just a few days ago, my mornings were filled with distractions and dread. Now there was this quiet pull toward gratitude. It was subtle, but unmistakable. That day, I chose to live slowly. I skipped social media. I turned off the noise. Instead, I walked through the park, letting the breeze and the trees speak to something inside me that had long been ignored. I thought about how saints often spoke of nature as a window into God's heart. Saint Francis called the sun his brother and the moon his sister, not in some poetic flourish, but because he truly believed all creation was family under the Creator. For the first time, I saw what he meant. Every leaf, every gust of wind felt like part of a bigger conversation. Later, I visited a local shelter, not because I had to, but because I wanted to serve in a way that stretched me. I spent the afternoon folding clothes, offering smiles, and listening to stories. One man, John, shared how he had lost everything, but still clung to hope. I talk to God every day, he said. Sometimes I yell, sometimes I cry, but I always talk. His faith humbled me. It reminded me that sainthood isn't about status, it's about surrender. John's presence was more Christ-like than most sermons I'd heard. When I left the shelter, I realized something that startled me. I hadn't thought about myself in hours. I hadn't been focused on my flaws, my anxieties, or my image. I had just been present. That felt like freedom. And maybe that's one of the secrets of the saints. They weren't obsessed with their own holiness. They were too busy loving God and loving others. Back home, I found myself humming a hymn without realizing it. The simplicity of it, the rhythm, the melody, the message, anchored me. I lit the candle again, sat down with my journal, and began writing not just about my day, but about the transformation taking place within me. It wasn't dramatic, but it was deep, like roots going down slowly, quietly, making me more stable than before. That night, I reread a quote from Saint Therese of Lisieux. Holiness consists simply in doing God's will and being just what God wants us to be. I sat with that for a long time. I thought about how many times I had tried to perform for God, pray perfectly, act devoutly, impress Him with spiritual ambition. But now I saw the beauty of just being open, being honest, being available. That was enough. And something unexpected happened before bed. My younger sibling called me just to talk. Normally, I would have been half listening, distracted or impatient. But this time, I was fully there. We talked about life, dreams, fears. I didn't try to fix anything. I just listened. And somehow that small act of presence felt like the holiest thing I did all day. As I prayed the rosary one last time for the week, I noticed that the prayers came not as repetition, but as rhythm. A heartbeat, a lullaby for my soul. I no longer questioned if I was feeling anything. I just trusted that the words were working, even when I didn't see the results. That's faith, after all. It's walking even when the path is dim. It's trusting that God is near even when your heart feels dry. The saints knew that. Now, I was beginning to know it too. By the time I drifted off to sleep, I realized I had changed. Not into someone perfect, but into someone more awake, more grounded, more aligned with the God who had been with me all along. Tomorrow would be Sunday, the final day of this Saint Week. But something told me this wasn't an ending. It was the beginning of something deeper, something lasting. And I was ready. Sunday morning felt like sunrise breaking inside my chest. I woke up with a calm I hadn't known before. Not the loud adrenaline kind of joy, but the kind that whispered, "You're exactly where you're meant to be." I didn't need to prove anything. I didn't need to push harder. All I had to do was show up and let grace meet me there. I walked to church that morning instead of driving. It gave me time to reflect. Every step felt like a conversation, not with words, but with presence. I remembered something I'd read from Saint Teresa of Avila. Prayer is nothing more than spending time frequently with the one we know loves us. That's what this week had become. A week of being with love. At Mass, everything felt different. The same liturgy, same hymns, same prayers, but I heard them with new ears. I wasn't just reciting responses, I was participating in a mystery. The reading that day was from Matthew. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. And I wondered, maybe purity isn't about perfection, but about clarity, about seeing God where we never noticed him before, in stillness, in struggle, in service, in silence. When it came time to receive the Eucharist, my heart felt full. Not with emotion, but with intention. For once, I wasn't focused on what I needed from God. I was just offering myself, imperfect, trying, open. That felt like the truest form of prayer I'd experienced all week. After Mass, I stayed behind for a while. The church slowly emptied, but I remained in the pew. I thought about how saints weren't supernatural superheroes. They were ordinary people who responded to grace one day at a time. Some doubted, some failed, some even ran away. But they all came back. They all said yes, over and over again. I could do that too. Maybe sainthood wasn't about arriving. Maybe it was about returning, always returning. The rest of the day I lived slowly. I ate lunch with my family and really listened. I helped clean up without being asked. I even went out of my way to call someone I had been avoiding just to say I'm sorry. That wasn't easy, but it felt freeing. Saints, I realized, are not remembered because they had it all together. They're remembered because they loved bravely. I wanted that. In the evening, I sat outside as the sun dipped behind the trees. The week was ending. But the peace I felt, it wasn't temporary. It was rooted now, like something had shifted deep beneath the surface. I had thought this week would be about doing more prayer, more sacrifice, more discipline. But it turned out to be about becoming more aware, more surrendered, more present. I opened my journal one last time that night. I wrote, "This week didn't make me perfect, but it made me real. It made me aware of how close God is, even in the ordinary. Maybe that's what holiness really is. Not escaping the world, but entering it fully, with grace." And then, just before I blew out the candle, I wrote something I hadn't expected to write at all. I don't want this to be over. Not because the week was easy, but because it was real. Because something in me had tasted a different way to live, a way not of performance, but of presence, a way of love. If you've ever wondered whether trying to live like a saint is worth it, even for a week, let me tell you, it is. Not because it will make you better than others, but because it will bring you closer to the one who sees the best in you, even when you don't. You don't have to get it all right. You don't have to feel ready. You just have to start. Light a candle, say a prayer, listen deeply, love more freely, one step at a time. And if this journey spoke to something in your heart, don't keep it to yourself. Share it. Invite someone into the beauty of becoming. Follow this channel for more ways to live intentionally, faithfully, and honestly in the everyday. And remember, you're not alone on this path. There's a whole cloud of witnesses cheering you on. This is Think Fresh Daily, and this week I tried living like a saint. It changed me. Maybe it'll change you too.